Welcome to Reformed Thinking. Today, we're digging into a source that presents God's judgment in a really stark way. It lays out a concept that offers either incredible comfort or a very serious warning, and it all comes down to one fundamental division.
So let's just jump right in with the big question the source tackles. How does God actually govern the world? The text argues that he does it by making a consistent, fair distinction. This isn't random at all, it's a deliberate division that affects literally everything, both in this life and at the final judgment.
You know, the simple fact that the Lord reigns causes two completely different reactions. If you belong to him, knowing he's in control is the best news you could possibly hear. It's a reason to rejoice. But if you're not on his side, the idea that the very being you've offended is in charge, well, that's a reason to tremble. It's the same truth, but with two opposite responses.
Okay, let's really get into it. The source explains that God's entire system of governance is built on a clear line he draws between two groups of people. And again, this isn't arbitrary. It's based entirely on where they stand in relation to him.
And here is that distinction, laid out as plainly as can be. On one side, you have the righteous, who are the objects of his tender care. On the other, you have the wicked, who are the objects of his merited, that is, his deserved, displeasure. The source is very clear that these are not just passive labels, they reflect God's active stance toward each group. Let's see what that looks like in practice, starting with the wicked.
To explain God's stance toward the wicked, the source uses some pretty strong language, but it's also quick to point out that we really need to understand how this language is being used so we get the right message. The source makes this very direct statement: God is angry with the wicked every day. That's a daily reality. But what does this anger actually mean? Is it the same as human anger? The text gives a really specific answer. So here's the key. The source material clarifies that words like anger and wrath are used in a figurative sense. They're not meant to suggest that God has, human-like emotional flare-ups. Instead, this language is used to describe his actions, how he deals with us. It shows his real, holy opposition to sin, and it points to some very real consequences.
And those consequences aren't just for some far-off future. They start now. The source calls this God's moral government in this life. It's where we see his tender care and his deserved displeasure actively playing out, leading to either protection or peril.
Just notice the stark contrast in action here. For the righteous, God's government is all about active protection. He shields them and keeps them safe. But for the unrepentant wicked, it involves a plan for their removal, their excision, and getting the tools ready for their destruction.
This next quote really shows the intensity of that protection. The source uses this incredible image to explain how personally God views the safety of the righteous. Harming one of them is like touching the apple of his eye, the most sensitive and protected part. It shows a deep personal investment.
On the other hand, for the wicked who don't turn back, the danger is not far off at all. The source uses this imagery of a warrior preparing for battle. The sword is sharpened, the bow is bent. In fact, the arrow is already on the string, aimed at their hearts. All that's left for it to be released. This isn't some distant threat, it's immediate. So how does all this wrap up? Well, the distinction we see now becomes fully public at the very end, during what the source calls the final judicial proceedings. This is where the two paths reach their ultimate destinations, one of exaltation, the other of perdition.
For the righteous, that final day is all about reward and vindication. Any false accusations they endured in life are cleared up for good. God himself confirms their character, and their righteousness becomes plain for everyone to see. And the end result? They're exalted to thrones and kingdoms forevermore.
But for the wicked, the final judgment is the complete opposite. The source calls it the day of the perdition of ungodly men. Here, they face the punishment they have earned. And while some might seem to escape justice in this life, the text says that on that day, there are no exceptions. None. Everyone receives their just reward.
The source gets very specific about the instrument of this final punishment. It's called toucheth. It's described as a place prepared long ago, deep and large, filled with fire and wood. And what sets it ablaze? It's kindled by the breath of the Lord.
After providing these details, the source just leaves the reader with this chilling question. It's designed to make you feel the weight of this final judgment, to really reckon with the seriousness of God's justice against those who rejected his rule.
So, to sum it all up, the source outlines a very clear structure for God's government. It's a system of two distinct paths, and which path you're on is determined by your relationship with him. One path is defined by his care and protection, and it leads to glory. The other is defined by his displeasure and peril, and it leads to perdition.
And this brings us right to the final, most crucial point. After laying out these two paths, the source turns the question directly to the reader. It says the most critical thing you can do is determine your own character. So, the final question is a simple but incredibly serious one. Which character is yours? Thanks for joining us for Reformed Thinking.